want to talk first off about aging and how we measure it, because I'm not sure, if we're going to not age or we're going to reverse our age, there has to be a calibration method. And I'm wondering, when you do that, is that telomeres? Because I know you talk about the Horvath clock also in your book.
Right.
How do you measure aging?
Well, we used to just look at people and that person looks kind of old, that person doesn't.
Right.
Then we had telomeres, which was all the rage in the 1990s. Actually, telomeres aren't the whole rage anymore. There's a new way of measuring aging, and it's this Horvath clock you mentioned.
Okay.
So the Horvath clock has revolutionized our ability to design ways to slow down and in my lab accelerate aging. We can measure it. I could take your blood today, maybe I should, take some back to my lab, and I could measure your actual biological age. So forget about candles, they're irrelevant. I could measure this Horvath clock, and I could tell you not just how old you are biologically, but how long you're going to live and when you're going to die.
When you're going to die?
Yeah, very accurately. It's scary, but this clock actually tells us, I think, about what the process of aging is. Why do we age in the first place?
So it's not, telomeres is sort of old school now? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I try not to just be black and white about this, but telomeres is certainly not the whole story of aging anymore.
So in general, then we're going to get very specific. Why do we age? How do we age?
Well, so this is what's in my book, which is I've kept bottled up an idea about aging, and we studied it for 10 years and kept it secret. And it all just flowed out onto the page in the book. And we have all this research to back it up. What I'm proposing is that there are lots of different causes of aging. Telomere loss is a main one. There's stem cell loss, senescent cells, so zombie cells that accumulate, all these things. We actually, as a field, I'm a scientist, first and foremost, we declared victory over aging about 10 years ago. We said there are 8 causes of aging. Let's put them in a pie chart. We're done. We know what causes aging. And I'm there thinking, that's great, but what causes those things?
Right.
Is there a unified theory of aging?
Okay.
And that's what I've got in the book. It's called the information theory of aging. And it can explain, I think, why all of those things happen. So instead of building 9 dams or 8 dams on 8 tributaries, we may be able to go all the way up and stop the main driver of what causes us to get old.
So I want to go through a couple of the things. By the way, the book, now has an audio version that's been updated as well. And I really recommend you all, if you have the book, is go get a look at the new audio book and listen to that, because there's a whole new thing in the book there that he's added as well. But I want to go through some of the basic things you've covered, because some of these things I do, and I'm wondering if they're still effective. And I'm wondering if I shouldn't be doing them anymore. But one of the things I was prescribed, I have had a touch of arteriosclerosis in my life. And one of the things my cardiologist was concerned about was inflammation in my body. And so I was prescribed metformin in an effort to reduce inflammation in my body. And I'm wondering all of your thoughts on metformin, because it's at the it's part of the book, and it's also part of a lot of the conversation about anti-aging, glucose regulation, and those kind of things.
Yeah, so the thing with metformin that everyone needs to know, and will know if they get the book, is that there are 3 main ways to slow down aging, 3 genetic pathways. I work on one pathway called the sirtuins, which we can talk about later, but they're a crux of defending against aging. There are 2 others. One responds to how much protein you eat, and the third one responds to how much energy, chemical energy is in your body. That's metformin.
Okay.
So metformin will trick your body into thinking there's not enough energy, and it'll respond and actually make your body, we think, fight against aging, and particularly type 2 diabetes. So metformin is a drug that came out from the French lilac. It's originally a natural molecule, but it was tweaked a bit, so it's now a drug. You need a prescription. But I'm shocked. Are you still taking metformin?
I'm not.
Ah, well, all right. We need to talk.
Okay.
But I'm not an MD. But
why should we talk? Should I be still taking it?
I don't make any recommendations.
In general.
But what I do is I take it.
You do?
Yeah, I don't leave home without it.
Can I tell you why I stopped, and you can correct me?
Sure.
Okay. I stopped because I started to read at least anecdotal evidence, because I do lift weights.
Yep.
I'm an athlete. I'd like to think of myself as an athlete, even though I'm pushing 50 years old. That it may have some negative implications on athletic performance, and or recovery.
All right, so now we're really jumping in fast. All right.
There we go.
All right, so
I've been waiting for today for a long time, sorry.
Yeah, so metformin, what it does is it inhibits your mitochondria, it makes your body think you don't have enough energy, and your body will respond accordingly, and you become what's called insulin sensitive. have low glucose levels in your body, and it'll prevent type 2 diabetes.
Right.
What we also know from studies of 10,000 up to 100,000 people in some studies, people who take metformin seem to be protected not just against diabetes, but against heart disease, cancer, frailty, and Alzheimer's. That's all good. That's what you find in an anti-aging or longevity pill.
Okay.
Metformin's great because it's, as far as we know, pretty safe. It's been taken by probably 100 million people around the world. It's on the list of the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines for humanity. So it's pretty good. You're not going to die from it. It's very rare. Consult a doctor as you did.
Okay.
But I was surprised that your doctor put you on metformin even though you didn't have diabetes. That's very rare.
The reason was, and I won't say her name, but I think she's sort of at the cutting edge of this, and she really does believe that one of the greatest risks to my health or anybody's health is developing type 2 diabetes.
Great. So your doctor knows a lot more than most doctors?
Correct. Most cardiologists, it's Lipitor and Crestor and, don't eat a steak.
Exactly.
Right.
And their view, and I train a lot of doctors and work with them, but their view is, unless you pass the threshold of a disease, we won't treat it. But metformin will prevent diabetes as well and get your glucose levels. And actually the best predictor of longevity right now, besides this clock, is your blood glucose levels. You want to keep them down.
Okay.
You do not want to go up. And I was going up and up and up. So I started taking metformin a couple of years ago.
You do.
And ostensibly my biological age, based on different tests, not the clock, but the other tests, went from 58 down to 31.4.
It's incredible. And you look 31.4 and I look 58. So I need to get back on metformin.
I was joking with Ed that I needed to wear this padded suit so that I don't look such a wimp.
Oh, I think you look
great.
great.
No, you're looking great.
Thank you.
But let's get back to the muscles. So this is called hypertrophy, muscular hypertrophy, which is great. I would love to look like you, and I just don't have the time to do it. But it's great. Plus you will be much stronger when you're older, which is key to living longer.
Bone density, things of that sort.
All of that's great. And actually one of the things we like to say in my field is the best way to live a long life is to hang on to the handrail, which basically means don't slip and break your femur or you're done for, like my grandmother.
Right.
But let's get into something really important. A lot of people aren't sure about metformin because there were 2 studies just this year that showed that it slows muscle hypertrophy.
Right.
But here's the good news.
Okay.
And I know the world's experts in this, and I've talked to the authors of the paper. So here's the scoop.
All right.
First time.
That's awesome.
All right, you're getting this the first time.
This is awesome.
What they found, and this is also work that's not yet out, so let me give you the scoop.
Okay.
The patients that got metformin and those that didn't, they all got bigger muscles and they all got stronger. Okay. One group got slightly bigger muscles. That was the group on placebo, and those on metformin didn't get so big. But when they did the strength test, they were equal.
Wow.
So they're all strong.
Wow.
They may not look as good.
Okay.
So I think it's a vanity versus longevity decision.
Okay.
But I think there's a way around this as well. Now, we're on the cutting edge, so we don't know for sure, but what I do is when I work out, I stop taking metformin, let my body recover for a couple of days, and then I go back on it.
Ah.
And, Peter Attia, the good doctor who studies this, we both agree that you don't want to be taking the same medicine every day necessarily, just as you don't want to work out every day. You need to give your body a rest.
Okay.
So, we cycle
So
these
in
things.
between workouts, you might, if someone works out, let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you might suggest that the workout days specifically they not take something like metformin on those days.
Well, that's what I do.
Okay.
That's based on everything we know in the world right now.
Okay. And then, by the way, thank you for that. You guys, first off, I'm so grateful that you exist. Because, we're talking about this off camera too, that this whole field that you're in is moving so quickly and you're at the cutting edge of it. And I think every person listening to this, in regards to they want to live healthier, they also want to live longer, but as they live longer, they want to be able to, I've already looked at it differently. I look different. I love my dad, but I look different at 48 than my dad did at 48. You know what I'm saying? I think athletically, physically, my strength level, and I think what's possible with somebody like you, like right now, if someone did all the things that are in your book, if they put the right formula together, not only do you think they can not be aging, but what's the window of time they might be able to reverse their aging by? I know that's by person, but in general, how many years can someone reel off their life or add to their life rather?
Right. Well, so someone like me doesn't typically exist because they're scared of what our colleagues will say. And it's pretty rough for a scientist to be out there talking about things that are really on the cutting edge and projecting into the future.
And to some extent speculative still, correct?
Right.
Based on evidence, but speculative.
But how selfish is it for me and my family to reap the benefits? We're all scientists in my family. We're on similar programs. how selfish is that for me to keep that bottled up? I want to
wonderful.
tell the world what I'm learning.
It's wonderful.
And we're in a world where now everybody can learn as fast as I'm learning and what I'm doing. And that's I feel an obligation to do that. But what about talking about the metformin, the story?
2.5 years it says it takes off, or adds
Well,
to. So if you're,
it can.
right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, if you're 50, you're now 47.5 if you're on the normal dose of metformin is what they're saying. But we don't really know.
We don't
know what it's going to do to diminish your ability to get type 2 diabetes, what that could do, heart disease, all the inflammation in your body because of these glucose spikes, correct?
Well, so here's the most important take-home message is that only 20% of your longevity and how you'll feel when you're 70 and 80 and 90 is genetic.
Okay.
The rest is in your hands.
Wow.
Isn't that, that's liberating?
Yes.
I mean, you can sit on the couch, you can eat potato chips, you can not exercise, you can eat whatever you want. But you're minimizing your potential.
Right.
And what we all have in our bodies, what we co-discovered in my lab, is that there are genes that control how long we live. We work on these pathways. And what we've discovered is they don't just exist, they respond to how we live. And what we want to do is trick our bodies into thinking there's adversity. Biological stress, not emotional stress, but biological stress.
Okay.
So now we understand, why does exercise make us healthier and live longer? Why does being hungry make us live longer? Why do all these things, eating good foods, it's because they're turning on these body defenses, these longevity genes that we work on. And that's the revelation. They're in all of us, but they become complacent unless we trick our bodies into getting this feeling of adversity.
Adversity.
So we call this hormesis.
Okay.
Hormesis is what doesn't kill you, makes you live longer. And that's the reason you should be running and getting out of breath. That's the reason you should be eating plants that have been stressed themselves. You get the benefits of those molecules that they make for their own benefit.
Okay.
We call that xenohormesis. Terrible word, but anyway, it's good to eat stress plants. Like that's why red wine's good for you, we believe. It's full of those molecules.
Thank God. Thank God.
Yeah, so resveratrol, you'll remember.
Yes. Where are you? So let's go
for that.
there. You're famous for that. And I got the feeling lately, maybe you're not as married to it as you once were, or am I incorrect about that? And then for those of you that are taking resveratrol, is it also not true that if you're not doing something that can make it bind to something so that it can be absorbed by your body, do you mind talking about that for a second? Because people just kind of willy-nilly take these pills, I think, to some extent, and think they're doing something. So A, do you still feel as strong about it as you did at one time? And B, could you tell us how to properly ingest it?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. So I also dodged the question, not intentionally, of how far can we slow and reverse aging?
You did. I'm sorry. You're right. I let you dodge that.
Well,
I'm so fascinated.
I worry because people say, oh, how can you say that?
Right.
Right. So this is my best guess, is that you can alter your lifespan at least a decade by how you live your life, maybe more.
Wow.
And my father is an example of someone who took life by the horns, changed his life. He's super fit. He's now 80. He's living life like he was 30 still. He's got no diseases.
Is that right?
He just put his name on a wait list for his dream car. I'm thinking, a wait list? You're optimistic.
That is awesome.
He started a new career. Really, this is the future for all of us if we look after our bodies and do what we think is the right thing.
Love it.
Right. So that I think that 10 years is
10 years is at least, based on current science, something you could be doing.
Right. And actually, every 4 years longer we live, we gain another year, just because the trajectory of the science, how it's going.
And we're going to talk about CRISPR a little bit later, where we might be able to interrupt heart disease and some other things here going forward that'll extend life. My God, it could be 3 decades. But go ahead, go on resveratrol if you would.
So resveratrol is this molecule in red wine that
Right.
is thought to protect the French from high-fat foods.
Yeah.
And we discovered that it activates an enzyme in the body called SIRT1, one of these sirtuin protective enzymes that's activated by hunger and exercise.
Okay.
So resveratrol we discovered as the first molecule that could mimic a calorically restricted diet and exercise. This wasn't an excuse to just sit on the couch and pop a pill, because we actually found that if mice took resveratrol and exercised and ate a healthy diet, they lived the longest.
Okay.
So it's a combination, but you want to keep these enzymes active, because as we get older, these defensive enzymes like SIRT1, they go down in their activity.
Okay.
So there are 2 ways to keep SIRT1 super active, besides living the healthy lifestyle that many of us know about and is in my book, page 302, 303.
Unbelievable.
Jump to the, because some people, they just want the facts, just want the list.
Right.
But resveratrol is a remarkable molecule because plants make it to survive, because plants have sirtuin longevity enzymes as well.
Okay.
But when we ingest that, we get the benefits. Right?
Okay.
So you said I was not as hot on that.
Yeah.
What happened was,
Yeah. Okay, I was right.
what happened was, all of us who've been blessed to be successful in what we do have gone through really hard times. And I had my moment, the worst time of my life, in 2010. So I'd spent the
What
last...
was it? Do you mind saying what it was?
Yeah, sure. So I had discovered resveratrol activates anti-aging pathways. We'd shown that it extended lifespan in everything from a yeast cell to a worm to a fly to a mouse, protected them against a Western diet, and even extended their lifespan when we gave it to them every other day.
Okay.
That was great. We developed drugs that were showing efficacy, working in humans to treat a disease called psoriasis,
Yes.
which is inflammation on the skin. Everything was looking like we were going to be the first people to make a drug that treats aging on the market.
Okay.
And then a couple of companies, for reasons that we can only speculate, came out with their science and said, it's all wrong. Everything David said is wrong.
I remember that.
It blew up.
Yeah, I remember that.
It trashed the trials, and I was the pariah of the scientific world. And it was tough. I spent a week in bed. I couldn't get out of bed. It was real depression. And I was really angry with the world, I'll admit, because here I am trying to do my best.
Right.
I'm putting my life aside. I'm putting my family aside to help the world, like you do.
Yes.
Well, maybe not your family, but you know, we want to help the world.
I know exactly what you mean.
And it was, and then everyone said, "Ha ha, you're wrong. Screw you." And it was tough. But you know, my passion is to leave the world a better place.
Yeah. This is your calling.
So I
obviously.
couldn't stay in bed.
Awesome.
You know, that to me is worse than death. Is just sitting there.
Hope everybody just heard that.
Yeah,
Right?
it really is. You got to have. My mission is to change the world in this way. So got out of bed and spent the next 3 years testing whether what these companies were saying, and I'll say who they were, Pfizer and Amgen, both didn't agree with us. But what it did, and the silver lining was, it forced us to do even better science and go back and test our hypothesis very, very rigorously. And we put out a paper in the journal Science, which is the best in the US, best in the world probably, showing that we were right, that resveratrol really was activating this enzyme and wasn't what the naysayers were saying. But you know what? In the media, there were crickets. No one cares about the comeback guy.
Right, that's right.
They just cared about the fall.
Right.
So what we've done over the last, 7 years, is we've been testing this even more rigorously.
Okay.
I'll tell you what we've done.
Okay.
We've created a mouse. We can genetically create mice with
Okay.
very specific changes.
Okay.
We changed the mouse by changing one amino acid, one part of this protein. So you don't mind if I get a little bit technical here?
Do it,
All right.
please.
So the enzymes are basically machines that change other proteins.
Okay.
And SIRT1, it's the traffic cop. It tells the body to fight diseases, fight aging.
Okay.
But to do that, it has to move. It has to change things.
Okay.
And what it does is it has this active enzyme activity in the middle, that's its chest. But this arm is the activator. This is the the accelerator pedal.
Okay.
So the accelerator pedal is pushed by resveratrol. Resveratrol will come in,
I get it.
stick here,
Yep.
push the accelerator, and now the SIRT1 enzyme is fighting against disease.
Okay.
Now we figured out that you can block this step by changing one little thing. Give it tennis elbow, it can't bend the elbow. Now resveratrol cannot work anymore.
Got it.
So we made a mouse that was unable to bend this arm and activate. So the accelerator pedal, we took it out of the system. The mouse is otherwise normal, doesn't have the accelerator pedal though. So if we're wrong and we give resveratrol to these mice, they won't live longer on a high-fat diet, Western diet. If we're right, resveratrol won't work at all.
Okay.
And we got the second result, 100%. And that's
Awesome.
as close to proof that we were right in the first place. So what I'm hoping is that'll reinvigorate the field and we'll get those drugs back into those clinical trials.
Okay.
But I haven't been sitting on my hands. I've been working on other molecules that seem to have a lot of promise
Okay.
and maybe even better than the original discovery.
Such as?
Well, we call them NAD boosters,
Yes.
or NADs, some people call
Yep.
them NADs. So there are two ways to activate these protective enzymes. One is the accelerator pedal.
Yep.
The other is the gas
Okay.
that comes in through here. And without either of those, you don't have hyperactive system.
Okay.
And as we get older, we lose this NAD.
Yeah.
So it's estimated that by the time you're my age, 50, and you're getting close,
All right, I'm right
you have
there.
about half the levels you did of NAD when you were young, when you were
Okay.
20.
Okay.
So of course your defenses against aging are going to be about half the levels that they were. So there are some ways to keep your NAD levels relatively high.
Okay.
One is to exercise, lose your breath, work out.
Lose your breath. You said that a couple times.
Yeah.
So
You want to lose your breath.
So not walking cardio, lose your breath cardio.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the best way, at
Okay.
least based on the animal studies we've done and some
Okay.
human studies.
Okay.
And then the second is you want to be hungry, at least
Okay.
part of the day. And that'll raise the levels of...
What do you mean by
your
that?
cortisol.
Like, so do you believe in intermittent fasting, or do you?
I do.
You do?
I do. We used to restrict calories the whole day
Yeah.
in these, what we call calorie restriction.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the paradigm for about
Okay.
70 years, actually.
Okay.
And then in the last 10 years, we've realized, hey, you don't need to always be hungry.
Okay.
You can actually eat a decent meal or two,
Okay.
but don't eat 3 meals a day. Don't always snack,
Okay.
because being hungry is what turns on these protective enzymes.
Mm.
And so I've now shifted my life to eating small meals. What I do is I skip breakfast as best I can,
Yeah.
eat a very late lunch or even forget to eat lunch, and then eat a normal dinner.
This is more and more. So that Dr. Ian Smith that I told you was on my show, his book was about intermittent fasting, but the aging benefit was never discussed. We discussed the health benefit, although I'm sure Ian's aware of it. It's not something that we discuss. Just to put a loop on resveratrol, what about the way you take it? Is it important? I was
Yeah.
reading that you thought something about taking it with either like a yogurt or a milk or something it can bind to. And why
Exactly.
does that matter?
Well, so there are clinical trials over the last 10 years based on our research, and some have failed and some succeeded.
Okay.
And the main reason that they've failed, in my view, is that doctors who don't understand resveratrol have just given the pill with water. And
Yes.
resveratrol is the equivalent of brick dust. It's like eating sand, right? We're here on the beach.
Okay.
If you eat sand, you're not going to absorb it.
Okay.
But if you crush up the sand and mix it with things, you might absorb a little bit.
All right.
That's what we do with resveratrol. And what I do personally is I have this amazing yogurt that I make myself.
Okay.
And I mix it with that, and it dissolves beautifully. And I have a couple of spoons of that.
So if I'm taking a pill, could I take it with a yogurt? Is that what you're suggesting?
That would work in your stomach.
Okay, okay.
I have powder in my basement, so I just spoon it in.
Okay.
I take about half a gram to a gram.
Okay. Awesome.
But yeah, you got to do that. And so
Okay.
the recent studies that have actually included resveratrol with a meal have succeeded in lowering blood sugar.
Got it.
And there are actually now, I was just at a meeting in Washington, D.C., where they have beautiful clinical data showing that it works like metformin to reduce blood sugar as
So
well.
this blood sugar concept, because that's my cardiologist, is a big thing too. This is just going to be huge throughout everything that we're learning about the body and keeping it stable and not aging, and also not even turning on certain. Can inflammation of the body speed up turning on a genetic code that's already in there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. The inflammation is a problem, because if you have inflammation, it'll also shut down these defenses against aging,
Okay.
and that'll lead to more inflammation and
Okay.
just accelerate aging.
Okay.
You know, we know that we get to about 40 and we're still pretty good. We get to 50 and we're starting to feel a little different, looking different.
That's absolutely true.
And then you fall off a cliff.
Yes.
That's this positive feedback of inflammation, shutting down longevity genes,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Okay.
And once
Because
you're on that,
I have
you're
found
dead.
that those things, and we're going to talk about them later, like my vision, other signs of aging, really started to accelerate in my mid to late 40s, approaching 50.
Right.
I mean, massive difference. So I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but
you
it's
gotta-
certainly something I've seen evidentiary, like my own experience as a human.
Yeah.
I feel myself aging now at this point.
Yeah, so there are things you can do to slow that down,
Right.
and things that we're doing that slow and reverse aspects, and then technology that can reverse all aspects.
Okay, let's keep talking about that. By the way, everybody, this is one of these shows. My audience loves this, just so you know. So many of them are driving right now. They're going to go back. This is a watch it again or listen to it again, and you're taking all these notes. So I want to go through a couple other specific things. We've talked about resveratrol. We've talked about metformin. There's sort of this cocktail sort of that you suggest to some extent. I want to talk about growth hormone for a second. What are your feelings about growth hormone, both taking an exogenous version or doing things that may, if it even works, of growing your own, and why is growth hormone so important or not important?
Yeah. So in my field of aging research, it's debated tremendously. And most of the debate comes from studies of animals. And what we find is that animals that have low levels of growth hormone live longer. So there's this...
Low levels live longer.
Right.
Okay.
But there's something that my colleagues don't appreciate, and that is a lifelong treatment of, or lifelong existence with low growth hormone. What you end up with is dwarfism. So small animals,
Okay.
due to a lack
Wow.
of development, live long.
Oh, wow.
It's
Okay.
also, by the way, known that the smaller you are, you tend to live longer. And we know that from pet dogs. If you've ever had
Sure.
a large dog, you know the problem. So the reason is that during development, we're actually slowing down the clock, and you actually the clock is changing when you're young as well.
Okay.
But what I believe anyway is, having read thousands of papers on this topic, is that growth hormone isn't bad, but it won't make you live longer.
Okay.
Because what it's doing is some benefits. It's going to improve your body's metabolism. It's going to help you grow muscle. But what it's not doing is turning on the longevity genes, which is what you need to do.
Okay.
The kind of things that I'm doing to get those active as well.
Okay.
So what's exciting to me is maybe you could take growth hormone, but then trick the body into thinking that it's lacking growth hormone and that you're exercising tremendously.
How would you do that?
Trick it?
Yeah.
Well, what I do is the combination of the metformin
Yes.
with the resveratrol, and there's the NAD booster,
Yeah. Okay.
which I take. Those are the three main components.
Okay.
By the way, I don't recommend anybody do anything. I'm
Right.
a PhD, not a doctor,
Right.
but I feel no obligation to say what I do.
And by the way, one other thing, there's all these companies out there suggesting that your name's on them, but you're not involved with any particular company that's NAD that they could purchase right now,
Zero.
are you?
No,
Zero.
no, I'm glad you mentioned that,
Yeah.
Ed, because if you look on the internet, you might think that I have 10 companies.
You would.
There's even a Sinclair lab. Somebody started a company with my name on there.
My goodness.
So I don't do that, and there's a very good reason for that.
Okay.
It's because I need to be able to give you my unbiased scientific opinion.
Okay.
And if I have some favorites, why would you trust what I'm saying?
Good point. Okay, so we got the growth hormone answer. Okay, my age. You find a dude looking like me. That dude may have had an interest in hormone replacement. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that. So I've had people say to me, as your hormones in your body diminish, you are aging. And so for that reason, in the anti-aging movement, particularly testosterone therapy for both men and women now is a pretty highly prescribed and recommended protocol as their own levels drop. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
There are 2 points. One is that maintain what you've lost. I
Okay.
think it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Testosterone and growth hormone.
Okay.
But don't think that they're going to make you live longer. That's
Okay.
not the solution.
Okay.
I think you need to combine that with these other things that will put your body in a defensive state.
Okay.
Because testosterone and growth hormone, they're going to do the opposite. They're going to put your body in the growth, reproduction state,
Okay.
which is great when you're young, but it's not going to extend your lifespan.
Do you believe, is it a wives' tale that either testosterone or the growth hormone may grow organs in your body, or do we not know? In other words, the heart might expand to a dangerous extent. And secondly, I just love asking you this stuff, sorry. And secondly, that potentially if you were to develop cancer or a tumor, that it could accelerate the speed of which the disease manifests itself in your body. Do we know? Do we have an idea? Do you have an opinion about it?
Yeah. Well, so it's debated. So there is the truth is we don't actually know.
Okay.
But I've read all the literature, and my personal take on the science is that it's not a risk
Okay.
to develop tumors. But if you have a tumor, then I think then you get serious with your doctor, and I think you stop this stuff.
Okay.
But everything I've seen is that things that you and I do, they're not going to make things worse. But if something's detected, then we're in new territory. So for instance, NAD boosters, I take those. If you give those to mice, they have new blood vessels. It's like a super drug for athletes.
Okay.
They can run further.
Okay.
But it also, you don't want extra blood vessels growing in your tumor. Right?
Okay. Good point.
So I think that with an abundance of caution, anyone who has a tumor, don't take these things.
Okay.
But it's not going to necessarily grow a tumor
Okay.
if you don't have one already.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's talk. By the way, thank you. Are you having as much fun doing this as I am? Because
Yeah.
you know all this stuff already.
Well, this is one of the best interviews I've done because we're
Thank you.
getting into all sorts of things that I usually don't get asked about.
Wonderful. Let's talk about aging for a second. So as we're measuring aging, I've read some things. Understanding what's happening. Could you explain to us? Is it the cell's inability to now read the DNA like it used to, or what's happening that's causing this to happen in our body? And is what I just said completely ridiculous?
No, it's correct.
Good.
We're done. We're done here. Ed's going to do the rest of the interview by himself. No, it's serious. Seriously,
Okay.
you summed it up probably better than I could.
Okay.
Which is, the analogy I use is a DVD. These old things you used to put movies on.
Okay.
Any kids watching or listening, these are old things you used to put digital information on. But they're a good analogy because you can actually scratch them.
Okay.
Right? And so a DVD is the digital information, and our genome, our DNA, is digital. Instead of zeros and ones, it's ATCG chemicals. That information is actually very robust. You can get it out of an old person, it's intact mostly. You can get it out of a fossil. It lasts for thousands, if not millions of years. That's the cool thing about digital information.
Okay.
It lasts. There's another type of information that controls the reading of those genes.
Yeah.
We call that not the genetic, but the epigenetic information. And epigenetic basically says, how is the DNA organized so a cell reads the right genes at the right time? And we don't know as much about it because it's much harder to read the epigenome than the genome.
Okay.
The reason is the epigenome is not digital information, it's actually analog. It sucks. Anyone who's had a cassette tape or a phonograph or a record player
Sure.
is actually experiencing the problems with analog information.
Okay.
There's generations of people now that have never experienced analog in their lives. But trust me, analog sucks. And our bodies, half of the information in our bodies is analog.
Okay.
And that's the problem. That's why we age.
Okay.
Because we have an analog system that reads the DNA. And over time, it doesn't read the right genes at the right time anymore.
Okay.
And cells, when they don't read the right genes, they don't function well. So our blood glucose goes up, we get weak, we get diseases. That's aging. But also, what happens is that the cells forget what type of cells they are.
Yeah.
They despecialize. We call it X-differentiation. Essentially, we become a melange, a collection of cells that have forgotten what kind of cells they should be.
Got you.
And that is pretty bad news, right?
Yes.
If you scratch a DVD, you're in trouble. We've been looking for the polish on that DVD, and I think we found it.
Okay, and it is?
Well, we call it reprogramming,
Okay.
genetic or epigenetic reprogramming. And it's a set of genes that we can put into cells or into the eye of a mouse and reset the age of that animal. Remember that clock that we're going to measure on you?
Yes.
We call that the epigenetic clock for a good reason, because
Okay.
it's actually the analog changes in the cell. Right?
Okay.
But here's what we can do. We can actually tell the cell, now that you're old and you're not reading the right genes, go back and read the genes the way you should.
Okay.
It's essentially polishing the DVD. Another way to think of it is we're rebooting the cell.
Yes.
We've got corrupted software. Screw that. Let's restart the whole computer,
Okay.
and you're young again.
Okay.
Right? Erase the hard drive, start again.
Wow.
But we didn't know that was possible until a year ago.
Wow. Wow.
That's what's in the book. I was writing the book as we made these discoveries.
Wow. Wow.
Imagine that. There's a memory of being young in all of our bodies that we just have to tell reset.
Oh my gosh. And so do you mind naming the company that you're involved with that I was reading about that had something to do with the retina, or you're working on it specific with eyes, is that not right?
Yeah, that's right. So
Okay.
it's still in stealth mode.
Yeah. This is incredible.
But I'll reveal it to
Okay.
all your listeners
Thank
for
you.
the first time. It's called Iduna, and it's interesting. The first part of it is eye, because we're going to treat glaucoma.
Oh my gosh, this is huge. Yeah.
And then Iduna is also the Norse goddess of longevity. But here's what we want to do. And I'm an entrepreneur just like you, because I believe not just in making discoveries, but making them practical for people. Iduna is planning and working towards treating the loss of vision in people.
This is unbelievable.
But if we can reverse aging in the eye, what can't we reverse aging in? So it's early days, but what we've just discovered, and we have a scientific paper, if you Google my name, you'll find it.
Okay.
We were able to reprogram the retina of an old mouse that couldn't see very well anymore to be young again. So the nerves in the back of the eye, they became young, and these mice completely got their vision back.
This is unbelievable. This is this may be one of the most exciting things that we're on the brink of, that you're at the forefront of on the planet right now. And the reason it's important to me, it's funny, as I've aged, I had perfect vision, as a baseball player, unreal vision. I could read a street sign from miles away. People, I don't know if it's miles away, but far away. And people say, how do you see like this? And now I'm finding I can't read the street sign from 30 feet away. This area where I'm most aware of my aging is in my ability to see. And I have a sister, I haven't told you this, who is juvenile diabetes, born without a pancreas that functioned. And she's gotten to the point where essentially in long stages of her life, she's been completely blind and now sees just to some extent. And so do you think that there's even properties eventually with people with massive retina deterioration you believe is going to be something that could be reversible at some point.
So I don't want to overpromise because
Sure.
it's just a year old and we're making discoveries pretty fast, but it's still in animals. But let's just suspend all sorts of disbelief right now and talk about what's possible. So what I can tell you is the reason that you and I are losing our vision, the reason we have to do this at night, is because the nerves in the back of our eye are not youthful anymore, and they're forgetting that they're nerves.
Right, as we said earlier, yes.
And if I reprogram your eye just with an injection, what I think would happen is that you'd get, those nerves would say, oh shit, I got to work well again. That I think we can do. Our nerves in our eye are no different than a mouse's eye, really.
Okay.
But we did another experiment. We crushed the back of the optic nerve. We really, like you crush your spine, it's not going to grow back unless you're a baby. We reversed the age of those nerves so much that they actually started growing back to the brain even after we killed them.
Oh my gosh.
We crushed them.
Oh my gosh.
So
so if you could do that in an eye, as you said, where else could that eventually be applicable in the body is you guys, unbelievable. Now we're not talking a decade. Now we're talking, I mean, we could potentially talking people living extremely long lifespans. What's doxycycline?
Doxycycline is an antibiotic that you take for Lyme disease and some other infections. It's pretty common.
But what's the application here?
Well, so we engineered our treatment so that we put the genes in the eye.
Yes.
And then we give the mice doxycycline for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And that turns on the genes.
Okay.
They get their vision back. Then we turn it off again by taking away the antibiotic.
Got it.
So here's a future scenario.
Wow.
We can put those genes into our whole body. And as we get older, or God forbid, we break our back, or we injure ourselves, and we're not going to survive, we get an IV of doxycycline, or we take a pill, and we become like Deadpool, and we can regrow things, like an axolotl would chop their limb off and they grow again.
Oh my God.
And then we stop taking the antibiotic, we're young, and then we can wait another few decades.
Right, do it again.
Right. So here's the cool thing. And I'm going to mention this in my social media because we don't know the answer yet, but I'll keep you updated. I'll give you a call. We don't
We'll
know.
have you back on.
We don't.
Right.
I'd love to come back on. We don't know how many times you can press the reset button and restore the hard drive. It could be once. We've done that. Maybe it's 100 times.
Oh my gosh. I'm such a I'm not a skeptic. I think sometimes my mind goes to what's the problem with that, and I think about, is there enough food in the world if people are living 200 and 300 and 400 years long? Have you thought through some of those issues? That's something you don't even think about.
No, I think about it all the time.
You do?
Yeah, because it's the planet and humanity that I care about.
Water and food, right? There's a finite amount of that, at least right now.
Well, so I talk about this in my book also because we can't just solve aging and make people live a decade or more longer without tackling the other problems we have. But what I've done is the calculations and the rationale comes out that this is the best thing we can do for the planet. Now, it sounds crazy, right? That if we have people living longer, how's that going to help? Well, first of all, it doesn't raise the population that much. In fact, most countries are leveling off anyway. Okay. Even if we stopped aging today, the rate of population growth isn't that much. There aren't that many old people that are dying, actually. It's actually less than the rate of immigration right now. Yeah. And there are a lot of countries that need help. Japan is losing its population, Europe as well. So there's that. But talk about consumption. We throw away half our food in this country. We've got to fix that first.
Sure.
Right? But the biggest thing, the big takeaway message is, if we can keep people healthier for longer and just have them die in a matter of months at the end, which is what happens if you live to 100.
I understand now. Okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
So centenarians, we call them, people who make it over 100, they die quickly, usually have a heart attack or a kidney failure. They cost at least 1/3 less than the rest of us.
I get it.
Let's get us all there.
I just got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's trillions of dollars saving. We already waste a lot of money on healthcare, keeping people alive for 10 years in nursing homes. I think we all have a duty to keep ourselves healthy for longer, if not for ourselves, but for our children and our grandkids who have to take care of us for 10 years.
This is a revolutionary conversation for me. It's a paradigm shifting conversation because some of the things we've discussed today, everyone, I want to go back. You have to get this book. You have to get this book. You have to be following this man on social media, and you're going to want to get the next one. This is someone that if you want to live better, longer, healthier, you want to stay close to this man because obviously he's going to live for a whole long time, and he's at the cutting edge of all of these things we've talked about. I want people to dream for a minute, then I'm going to go for a question about, I don't have a lot of money, and I want to begin to live longer. But I want to go to one more thing, just because I want people to understand some of the possibilities that are out there. Talk to them about CRISPR just a little bit, because this is, combined with what you just described, something that is, you begin to think through all of the technological advances in the world. But in terms of this space, we may be entering the, if we want to call it the internet age of anti-aging right now. We may be sitting on the Apples and the Microsoft concepts, the Googles of anti-aging right now in some of these spaces, and these will change people's lives. So tell them about CRISPR just for a second,
Yeah,
if
right.
you would.
So we've gone through what we can do today in our daily lives.
Right.
And there's cutting edge technology that I talk about in my book, and we just talked about, that's coming very soon.
Yes.
And there's medicines already that you can possibly take. But the future looks incredible. I've already said that even if we don't have these breakthroughs, every 4 years we get to live longer, we get another year of life. That's great. But what's coming makes my head spin. And I've been at the cutting edge of genetics for the last 30 years. And I just can't believe, every morning I wake up and I pinch myself that we're living in the future already. But what's coming blows my mind. So in my department at Harvard Medical School, I get to work with people who grow eyes in a dish, and people who work on all sorts of futuristic stuff, growing brains in a dish. George Church is one of my good friends and colleagues. My lab's just on the different floor than his in the same building. So he's one of the guys that, women as well, there were a team of people that showed that you could actually edit the human genome.
This is huge.
So we can now read the genome. Instead of $1 billion to read your genome, I can do it in my lab for a device that big.
Right now.
For $100.
Right.
I can do that today.
Yes.
And soon it'll be in a few hours for less than the cost of a needle.
Crazy.
That's the crazy stuff. But it gets even crazier when we can actually change the genome. We don't just read it, we write it.
Right.
And we can change genes, we can put new genes in very easily. There are drugs on the market. Most people may not realize, you may not realize that we can now, the FDA approved drugs, we are changing people's genetic diseases. We're curing genetic diseases. Yes. We are living in the future, man.
It's crazy.
But the future for us is going to be even crazier, because we are just on the cusp of hundreds of companies working on CRISPR and gene therapy. And this is the hottest thing in biotech right now.
I mean, imagine everybody, the ability to interrupt the fact that you have a predisposition to heart disease or a form of cancer, and interrupt that. How about this? Maybe this is nuts. Could we potentially interrupt somebody's and make them smarter? Could you change someone's intelligence through altering their genome? Could you do that?
Well, theoretically, there's a lot of genes involved in intelligence, and the brain has to be wired from an early age.
Okay.
But we know that drugs are capable of making you more intelligent, or at least give you more creativity. So we could do that theoretically. But one of the things I'm excited about is being able to alter our bodies in ways that make us resistant to certain diseases.
Okay.
Heart disease, HIV. Now, we can get to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
There are 2 kids on this planet that were genetically modified to be resistant to HIV. That's craziness. Now, crazy to think about. Now, there's a whole debate. We in the world should start debating whether we want to not just help ourselves, but do we want to make our kids resistant to heart disease, to cancer? We know how to do this. If you said, David, could I make my kids resistant to cancer? That's easy. I could do that in my lab. One of my students could do it. It's not difficult. We know that there are species that live a lot longer than us. They have certain gene variants. They have special types of these longevity genes. Whales can live 200 years. We know pretty much what they're doing. They're stabilizing their epigenome. Their DVDs don't get scratched as much. So whales can live 200 years. So it's possible. We know some of the genes that are involved. We could give ourselves that, or we could give our children that.
Why would we not? What are the negative implications of something like that?
Well, we just want to make sure it's safe. I think that's the main
Meaning, what
one.
else is it doing? Is that what you mean?
Right. You could make them intelligent, but they might then get cancer the next
I got
week.
you. So I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Senolytics. Am I saying that correctly?
Senolytics?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, they're exciting too.
Okay.
So that's also been a breakthrough. So as I mentioned, that before we figured out how to reprogram the body, the best technology and understanding we had were these hallmarks of aging. There are about 8 of these. And I mentioned some of them.
Yep.
One of the main ones is senescent cells, which accumulate.
Right. Okay.
Right. So when you get a really bad scratch DVD, when your cells forget what type of cell they are, they can kill themselves. But if they don't kill themselves, they become senescent. So what's senescent? They actually, instead of dying, they just sit there like zombies.
Yes.
And that'd be fine, except they start to secrete these factors that cause other cells that are healthy to grow old and defective. Inflammation is a big problem.
Yeah.
And we think that senescent cells are causing this problem.
Okay.
So senolytics is just a word for drugs that will kill off those cells when they're not dying themselves.
Got it.
And in mice, if you do that, they get rejuvenated.
Okay.
And they get younger.
Okay. I'm thinking through someone listening to this, because the typical person in my audience, I think, works out to look better or eats to look better. And I think the next level of consciousness, particularly, unfortunately, I found that anti-aging has almost become a space and an area where people with some affluence have been thinking about more than people that are just trying to get through life and improve their stock in life. And I don't like that part of it.
Yeah.
And so I know there are people listening to this going, this sounds good. I can't afford to get metformin. I'm probably not going to take growth hormone, and I'm not sure that I should anyway. Resveratrol is relatively affordable for most people. You could probably get your hands on that potentially. But if you were to give me 2 or 3, 4 basic things I could do to begin to reverse the aging process for me, would it be the caloric restriction? Would it be carbohydrates?
Yeah.
What would those few things be if I'm not able to get myself a couple of these medications that I should be putting in my body right away?
Yeah. Well, so I absolutely agree with you that we can
Okay.
talk about gene therapy for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is great if you're losing your vision, by the way, but these are not available to everybody.
Right.
And I just got back from Africa a few months ago, and believe me, there are people in this world that don't care about anti-aging.
Sure.
We also don't call it anti-aging where I come from, because anti-aging is a whole group of people who are working on other things. So we call it longevity research. But if there was one thing you asked me that I could give advice, or maybe a few things, the first would be eat less often. There are studies that have been done with my colleagues at the National Institute of Health. They gave mice, who have very similar metabolisms to us, very different diets. They wanted to know, is it better to eat more meat or to eat more carbohydrate or more fat?
Okay.
Big debate. And the result blew me away.
Okay.
He found that it wasn't better to eat more meat. He found it wasn't better to eat more fat, and it wasn't better to eat more carbohydrate.
Okay.
It wasn't what you ate. All those mice lived a normal lifespan.
How much you ate?
But
how
the
often?
ones that ate it in a small time of day, 2 hours a day, lived 20% longer.
Wow.
So here's the
Wow.
take-home message.
Wow.
If that's right, it's not so much what you eat, it's when you eat that's important.
Okay.
And so I've gone on a diet where I restrict when I eat. I try not to eat breakfast, try not to eat lunch. That has made me feel a lot better. I'm sharper, and I think that I'm going to live longer because of that.
Okay.
So that's step one.
Okay.
And in fact, that saves money.
Sure
Right.
does, right.
Right. And don't overindulge in anything. Don't just eat all meat, in my view. Don't eat all fat.
Okay.
You want to mix it up. Trick your body. Oh, I'm running out of this. I'm running out of that. And even with resveratrol, don't have to take it every day. Take it every other day. Tricks your body. Another thing that's cheap. Get off your ass.
Okay.
I typed a book, and I think I aged a lot writing this book, actually. But it was worth it. But if you don't get your body into a state of breathlessness or get your muscles to be tired and sore, your body will say, hey, everything's good. I don't need to fight diseases. I don't need to fight aging.
Okay. Okay.
So you lose your breath at least a few times a week if you can.
Okay.
Get on a treadmill. I think 40 minutes is great. 10 minutes is good. But anything is better than nothing.
Okay.
What else is good? So what I do when I go to the gym on Sunday with my son,
You go once a week.
well, I try to go more,
Okay.
and I'm on planes a lot.
Yeah.
But I have a home gym, so I try to do a little
Okay.
bit. But I don't live a perfect life. It's maybe why I take extra molecules to try and supplement that.
Offset it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But
Can I tell you one thing
finish work about midnight, so it's
Yeah,
a bit hard.
you're in that mega achiever, multiple companies, your lab, all the work you do, children. You're at that point where, yeah, sometimes your fitness and your nutrition may take a back seat,
Right.
right? Which is probably not healthy. One thing you didn't mention that I'm surprised, and I've not heard you talk about this. What about being happier?
Yeah.
So, and I know it's not part of the research necessarily, or maybe it is, but do happy people live longer?
They do. They
Okay.
always do.
Okay, so how come that's not part of what's talked about, or is it just so anecdotal or silly that it's not discussed? But
Yeah.
but I would think happier people have less stress in their body, probably less inflammation in their body, just by not having
Well,
that kind of stress.
It's true. It's true. But one of the reasons we don't talk about it is that we don't understand why it works.
Okay.
But it's
because
a
as
fact.
scientists, you have to be able to prove why it works. Okay.
Yeah, that's why people didn't regard aging as a disease, which I do. We didn't understand why aging happened, so we said,
Okay.
It's natural, let's not deal with that. But now, like cancer, we understand, we think how it works. You can focus on that. Now it's okay to say it's a problem. Happiness, wishy-washy.
Okay.
But all of the centenarians, the people that live to 100, they're always happy people.
That's right. Right.
Right. Mind you, if I lived to 100, I'd be pretty happy too.
Right. No, there's a good
No,
point.
but they've been happy their whole life.
Yes.
And that's definitely works. But I haven't been happy my whole life. I'm a lot happier now that I'm 50 because I've learned what a bad day is, and most days are not bad days, even if you think they're bad. But yeah, early in my life, I was quite depressed actually.
We talked a little bit that off camera, so let's just go there for a few seconds. I've told you that the thing that surprised me the most, and I just think it should, here's somebody who's, you know, arguably the best person in the world in their field, is doing work that has tremendous meaning. I mean, I don't know that you could do work that has more meaning to mankind than what you're doing right now outside of spiritual work. Yet, you're not always happy. You haven't always been happy in your life. And I think it's important that people know that, because I've told people that, you know, on my show, the thing that surprised me the most, all these mega achievers, what do they all have in common? Some of it's work ethic, some of it's good fortune, some of it's intellect, but they don't all have those things. The vast majority struggle with, to some extent, with a little bit of their mental health. Do you still? When I met you, when we just embraced when you first got here, I thought you had an ease and a, honestly, like an elegance about your personality. This is somebody very comfortable with themselves. But as I've started to watch you more, I wonder if there's this dude in there that's a little bit at battle with himself, that's wondering if he's not moving this at the speed that he should, if his work is not where he would like it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a perfectionist and an overachiever. I want to leave the world way better than I found it, at least somewhat better. And I find myself in a position of great responsibility. Now I'm at Harvard and I've got this research. So I'm maximizing my day without sacrificing my family as best I can. But early in my career, because I set such a high goal from an early age, ever since I was 4, I wanted to understand why we age and wake the world up. Why aren't we worried about this? This is not good. We treat cancer, we treat heart disease, we treat frailty, we treat Alzheimer's. But you know what causes all of those things? Aging. Why don't we care? And so I've always set that goal. And there were stages in my life where I thought I wasn't going to achieve anything. I saw that I was stuck in thought I was stuck in Australia. I just finished a Ph.D. There were no jobs for PhDs who were studying the sex life of a yeast cell. That's what I trained in.
That's awesome.
And I thought, what have I done? I've worked myself into such specialization. I'm not going to change the world. I might make some yeast happier, but that's about it. And being inconsequential is worse than death for me. I want to wake up every day feeling as though I'm going to make a difference.
Being inconsequential is worse than death for you.
Yeah.
You know what occurred to me as you were saying it? You know, one of the obligations, responsibilities we all have is to create a life that we want to live longer for. Right. And so for the vast majority of you listening to this, you know, one of the things that is so important about all the things you listen to on my show, and particularly today, is how about we start creating a life that we can't wait to be around for longer in anticipation of. Hey, it's Ed Mylett. I just wanted to thank you for being here, and I would ask you to please subscribe to the show. If you just click the subscribe button here, I would really appreciate it. It helps the show grow so we can get even more successful guests on the program to help you. At the same time, if you're subscribed, you're going to get access to the programs before anybody else in the world gets access to them. So if you would, click subscribe right here. Thanks so much. So you talked a minute ago about hormone levels. And so I have been on, and I know what you're going to say, but I want you to explain your point of view on this to the audience. Full transparency, the audience knows this. I've been on testosterone, some form of testosterone replacement therapy. My gosh, it's got to be 10 or 15 years. And I know that testosterone, at least in my case, negatively, we're getting real detailed here, but it can negatively impact HDL, for example. It can suppress HDL, which mine is already genetically pretty low. So there's a danger, HDL being your good cholesterol. I know that that's a negative to me taking the testosterone. Having said that, I watch friends of mine that I know that are in their 70s that have been males that have been on testosterone therapy for, say, 20 years. And I compare that visually to somebody like my father who passed away last year. And visually, externally, these guys that were on testosterone look 20 years younger than my dad did. And so this, I'm not arguing with you about, I want to understand it. That's why the first thing I asked you today is, if you visually look younger, are you likely to be internally younger? Because visually, if you take somebody like a very well-known actor that most people know has been open about taking testosterone, who's a friend of mine, who makes a lot of like boxing movies and stuff, right? And so you compare him to my father, who is about the same age, and visually they really looked like different species almost at that age. So what are your thoughts about hormone replacement? And if you're not for it, which I think you probably aren't, specifically why?
Well, I'm all for keeping your hormones at young levels.
Okay.
I'm all about keeping the body the way it was when it was 20. And however you can do that and it's safe, do that.
Okay.
You know, so I'm on board with hormone replacement therapy for women and men if needed.
Okay. But you think maybe not needed. I'm interrupting you.
That's the point that I have tried my best to find ways in myself to.
So you're
build
52.
up.
You're in that 300 to 700 range of testosterone in your body. You're saying right now your hormone levels are that normal in your 50s without any.
I'm actually naturally higher than an average 20-year-old, but naturally meaning I've worked at it.
Okay.
I've changed things in my diet. I've done things and it's gone.
What are some of those things?
Well, exercise helped building up. I'm not as bulky as you, that's for sure. But from my basal state, which was pretty puny, to having some muscle, my quads mainly, big muscles, back muscles as well, doing deadlifts, this kind of stuff. So that helped a lot. Got it up to hovering around 500.
Okay.
It's gone close to double that over the last couple of years with changes to my diet, changes with supplements. But I can't tell you scientifically which one of those has contributed, but it's steadily gone up, which is good. If it had plummeted, I would have stopped taking X, whatever it was.
Okay.
But I'm happy with these numbers, so it's just under or near 1,000 now.
My God, that's amazing.
It's shocking actually, because I haven't done anything obvious. You know, you read online what boosts testosterone. I'm not doing a lot of that stuff. So I guess I'm lucky that way.
So that was one of the genetic good hands you were dealt compared to some of the other stuff that wasn't so favorable. That's because that's unbelievably high for 52 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, you know, I want to be helpful practically. So some of the things that I do this fasting has helped. I think that when I started, well, I don't call it fasting, eating once a day, one meal a day.
I got you calling it fasting now.
Yeah, that's okay. People know what that is. OMAD is the other way to do it, to call it one meal a day. But that seemed to help. And so also giving up a lot of fat and a lot of meat. Now, that's not going to sound good to everybody, I know. I
want them to know.
Yeah, but I think that's helped. And I did lose weight, and that may have contributed to, right? I mentioned how much weight I've lost. But here's the thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to supplement at all. I'm not against it. I think what you're doing is perfectly acceptable.
But I heard you say something about burning the candle at both ends. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So it's an abundant signal. Testosterone is, times are good, build muscle. But then I have to look at the clinical data. And while it won't extend your lifespan, and that's really clear, there have been probably $50 million worth of clinical trials saying that testosterone won't make you live longer. It will help you have more muscle, which will prevent you falling over and breaking your bones, which is a problem for most elderly. So that's good. But there's also not a lot of downside. There's very little, if any, that I've seen. There's not more cancer.
There isn't.
No.
Okay.
No. So put it this way, it's not going to hurt you. If you feel better and you're stronger and you look better, you know, by all means. And this is why doctors prescribe it. Otherwise, you know, there'd be a warning. But is it going to make you live longer? Doesn't look like it, unfortunately.
One of the challenges I think with it is that, you know, for most people, if some is good, a whole bunch is better. And what I find with people that start to take hormones is you need to be, I think it can become a form of an addiction. And that you're like, well, I'm at 800, I look like this. Let me get this thing to 1500 and see what I really look like. And then there are some unhealthy things, your hemoglobin levels, things like that you've mentioned already. There are things that can get out of whack that if you're not, you know, you're really careful with it. So that's some of the stuff. I just want to ask you that because it's been very common for women to become on, you know, some form of hormone replacement too. And I've just, in my own case, I'm at My last labs, I was only at 400 with supplementation. And one of the negatives, I think, certainly for me, is that my own body has probably made a decision that it doesn't need to work at it anymore or produce it because I've got this exogenous stuff I keep shoving in my body. So I do know that once I've made that commitment, I'm sort of committed for life. So there are some, I'm not proponent or of it necessarily. I certainly wouldn't recommend starting it until you need to. Yeah. Until those levels are lower. And here I am telling you what I propose, which is a really fascinating part of the interview. So, so we've got that. How about any of the peptides? So I'm curious about growth hormone. Yay or nay?
Nay.
Nay. Why?
Well, because there's a lot of evidence, both human and mouse, that when you have low amounts of growth hormone, you live longer. And well, again, it's this abundance versus adversity.
Mm-hmm.
You'll feel better with growth hormone.
Mm-hmm.
You'll heal better. But long term, all the evidence points to the opposite, that having low levels of these growth signals is better for you.
Tumor-wise as well. This mTOR pathway thing, the other part of it is its impact on tumors, right? Isn't there some relationship between those two things with tumors? And does growth hormone impact the size of a tumor? Is it telling everything in your body to grow, for example, potentially?
I mean, potentially, but fortunately, there's not a lot of evidence that growth hormone does cause cancer.
Okay.
So I would say that
but
again,
could it cause a cancer in your body to grow potentially?
Well, if you've got one,
yeah.
I mean, that's part of the downside of all of these treatments is that it's all fine until you get a tumor, and then you could actually help the tumor.
Do you feel the way about testosterone, or are you saying that about growth hormone, or both?
Growth hormone more.
Okay.
Testosterone, I think that it's fine.
Okay. I know this is stuff you don't normally get asked. That's why I wanted to go there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I take that I think keeps at least, let's say, the evidence points to, I have to speak like a Harvard professor sometimes, is that by activating these other enzymes that are the second component out of those three, the sirtuins I work on, you can activate those by doing the kind of things I do in my life, but I can also take a supplement which raises NAD, capital NAD. And people are taking IVs of NAD supplements. It's a big thing. It was discovered in my lab in part, about 2002 when I was a kid. But it's now a big thing. And the reason that NAD is popular is that it activates these sirtuins. And we have 7 of those in the body. We talked about this last time. The 7 sirtuins are the protectors of the body. There are 3 of them that protect the DNA, and the clock slows down, we think. And then some of them are in mitochondria. There's 3 there. And then there's one that floats around in between in the water that's in between all of that. And that's number 2. Now, SIRT2 controls hormone production. And if you give it to cells, they'll make more androgens. And one possibility is the reason my testosterone is doing pretty well is I've got super high NAD levels because I've been supplementing for about 7 years now with NMN, which is a precursor to NAD.
Stay there. Okay, I want to go there. So that was the next thing on my list was NAD. So of the people that I know that look freakishly and unusually young for their age that I have met in, say, the last 36 months, I cannot get over how many of them have told me that I'm on NAD and I'm on metformin. And I'm talking about everywhere from a gym to a golf course to a business meeting. And I'm talking about visually, shockingly looking young people, mainly people in their 50s that look like they could be in their 30s or early 40s to me. So when you say NAD, do you believe in the IV therapy? Do you believe in the stuff you can inject with subcutaneously? Or are you speaking specifically about this precursor that you were referencing?
Well, what I believe doesn't so much matter, but the scientific evidence points to taking a supplement every day, a gram of NMN, which is this precursor, stands for nicotinamide mononucleotide for the aficionados. Just swallowing one of those, or 1,000 milligrams, is enough to double your NAD levels in the bloodstream, and triple it if you take 2 grams. Now, I'm 52, so if I'm an average human, I would have half the levels of this NAD molecule than a 20-year-old. So doubling it is the goal for me. So I've been taking a gram of NMN, swallowing it every day for, the last, whatever it is, dozen years, 7 years at least. Then the question is, what about the NAD IVs? There's very little data on that.
Yeah.
I would say that I have tried it. I've found that it felt fine. especially afterwards. During it, have you tried it? It's
I have.
got a little cramping in the tummy area.
It does. Yes. And I found that on the IV, and also I've taken it sub-Q, and I get a real burning, uncomfortable sensation in my stomach. It's ironic that you say that.
Yeah.
It's exactly my experience. Yeah.
So there's some evidence that it's good for treating addiction, but really no solid scientific evidence that it helps in other ways yet. But that doesn't mean it doesn't help. It just means that
it hasn't been studied enough.
doctors haven't done enough placebo controls.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to give people a placebo, especially if they're paying for it.
Yeah.
Right? So I would say the jury's still out, but the science, I think, is there that it should activate the sirtuins, kick them into action, and at least for those few hours that you're getting it, and it'll go up probably double, triple the levels in your bloodstream. It'll help, but I don't know long term.
I'm so fascinated by this stuff, as everybody can tell. So you're getting stuff here you don't get most other places, you guys. So these are just things to think about. These aren't necessarily recommendations, things to think about. Then there's metformin. And so just, I must say this to you. You and I met. This is a passion of mine. I've also had a not great genetic candidate. By the way, guys, there's all kinds of stuff we could talk about on genetics today that you can get studied right now to see if you're predisposed to heart disease or different cancers. You can even find out if it came from your mother or your father's side. There's all kinds of things you could figure out right now. My genetic hand is crap. It's just mom and dad's side, both not good, and both cancers and heart disease. So when I met David originally, this conversation really mattered to me. And so I did start on metformin. This is just me personally. I'm telling everybody my own medical stuff. I did start on the precursor for NAD, and I've tried the IV stuff and I've tried the sub-Q stuff myself. So metformin helps with glucose in the body somehow, the metabolism of glucose, correct? So why do you think metformin works, and do you feel real strong like you did last time that you were here about it?
Yeah, I feel even stronger. There's a lot of data from looking at tens of thousands of people that went on metformin, and people who go on metformin who have type 2 diabetes, who normally would live a short lifespan because they have more cardiovascular disease, they're aging faster, they're actually protected from these diseases relatively. And those type 2 diabetics on metformin live longer than people that don't have type 2 diabetes. That's a remarkable observation. And because once you start to study tens of thousands of people, it starts to look real. And especially for those people that are predisposed like you are to cardiovascular disease and other issues like cancer, there it's very clear that metformin on average protects you against those diseases, because it's not just working on keeping your glucose levels down. Remember, it's turning on the mitohormesis and protecting the body through these defense mechanisms. Now, people might be thinking, well, okay, you've got these protective mechanisms, but what are they actually doing to make you healthier? Well, I've mentioned only one of the things they do, which is turning over those old proteins that are either oxidized or have glucose stuck to them. But they do other things. They do protect telomeres when you turn them on. But they do another thing that's really interesting, and that is that they can rejuvenate stem cells. And so you get stem cells protected, and then they can divide, and then they can repopulate the body. Another thing that they do really well, particularly the sirtuins, is that they help repair broken DNA. Anyone who's been in the sun, I was Australian, I've been damaged badly by the sun. That ages you. It actually is, we know that damage to DNA accelerates aging. In my lab, we can cause a mouse to be 50% older by doing this process. The sirtuins will slow that down. We had a paper in Science in 2018 that showed that by raising NAD levels, by giving mice NMN, the same molecule that I take, their DNA repair systems were much more efficient. And if you damage them with radiation, which we were trying to simulate space radiation, but it's also similar to cosmic rays that you get if you fly a lot, which I know you do. NMN was protecting those mice from the damage. And you can see the damage. You look in their livers, there was damage in a normal mouse, and give them NMN, and it wasn't there for the most part. So that's another way it can protect against aging.
So good. So good. We're going to keep going because I love this. Any disclaimers on any of this that we've said so far that you would say to somebody who says, I got to get on this metformin or NAD? Is there any disclaimer, any downside, anything you would advise them to do, just so that I make sure everyone's heard the totality of your thoughts about it?
Yeah, well, the one disclaimer is I'm actually not a trained physician. I train physician, but I'm not a trained physician. I'm a Ph.D. who studies molecules. And so there's that. So anytime you want to change something in your body, even if it's diet, but if it's a supplement, and of course a drug, you need your doctor, you want to consult them. So your doctor needs to know everything that's going on in your body, because supplements are sometimes just as powerful as drugs.
Okay.
And if you cannot get, for example, this is a good point I think to bring up, is if you cannot convince your doctor to get metformin,
Yeah.
there is an alternative. You know what I'm going to say. It's a plant molecule called berberine from the berber plant. And if you, in clinical trials, if you take it at 2 grams a day, it does lower blood glucose, similar to metformin. And that you can buy on, any pharmacy or online.
Yep. That's where I began. After we did our interview, I went to my doctor and I said, we're getting on metformin. And she said, no, we're not right now, not yet. And so that's where I began. And then after a period of time, she did a little bit more research and agreed. Have you done any reading on MOTS-C at all?
I've done more than reading.
Okay. What do you know about MOTS-C?
MOTS-C. Well, I know the scientists involved and I helped them start a company.
Come on now. Really? Okay.
I'm kind of embedded in this field.
I know, but this is awesome.
Around. I'm older than you might think.
Okay.
So MOTS-C is really interesting. I really like it.
Okay.
I liked it so much I started a company.
Yeah.
So MOTS-C is a super interesting molecule from an academic standpoint.
Okay.
And from a physiological standpoint.
Okay.
MOTS-C is made not by the DNA, from the DNA in the nucleus, which is most of our chromosomes. It's from the chromosome that's in mitochondria. So mitochondria, because they're like these bacteria, they have their own circular DNA. It's not a chromosome, it's circular. And embedded in that circle piece of DNA in the mitochondria is a little gene called MOTS-C, capital MOT-C. And the mitochondria make this little peptide, a little piece of a protein. The peptide is just a small protein that gets leached out into the bloodstream and tells the rest of the body that a certain part of the body is experiencing hormesis. So when you exercise, your body is secreting MOTS-C into the body. And MOTS-C is really small. You can synthesize it and you can even get it. I don't know if it's still available in the US, but it's in clinical trials right now in this company. It's called COHBAR, C-O-H-B-A-R.
Okay.
And it's looking promising as a treatment for fatty liver, but hopefully other age-related diseases.
Maybe even plaque removal and stuff like that, right? And there's all kinds of fascinating stuff. So I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk about all this stuff today. Okay, so some practical stuff just for a second, or exciting stuff. CRISPR. We've talked a little bit about CRISPR, but this concept, where are we at being able to actually alter DNA? Like, I've had some friends of mine that, knew I was going to be talking to you today, and they're like, please get like the update. So tell everyone here what CRISPR specifically is, but where are we at on right now, where are we? And if you were to forecast, say, within the next 5 years, where do you believe we are on able to actually alter DNA that way?
Yeah. Well, right now it's possible to add genes to humans. So we've cured, not we, but scientists and doctors have cured genetic diseases that way.
Incredible.
Blind people are seeing again.
Yes.
But it's only small, it's thousands of people, it's not millions yet. But we are getting better at it. And eventually, probably certainly in this decade, we'll see people being able to add genes to their bodies more commonly. But CRISPR is different. CRISPR is not adding genes, it's actually changing your genetic makeup permanently. And so where we're at is there are some genes or some studies that have shown that it works in humans. You can correct sickle cell anemia and fix that. That one's a little easier because it's in the bloodstream. Trying to fix Alzheimer's with CRISPR is going to be a lot more challenging. The blood is easy to access. And the way we do it is we put a CRISPR system, which is an enzyme that you can direct to change the DNA with a barcode. So our DNA has different letters. There's 6 feet of this DNA molecule in every cell. And there are these 4 letters, A, C, T, G, and they're in different sequence. And what CRISPR does that's kind of incredible, if you think about it, is that you can give it a code that says, go find the sequence that's A, T, G, C, A, G, C. And it'll find it in billions of combinations in that 6 foot and go in and just change that.
Incredible.
It is. It's a barcode. And so I would say in the next 5 years, it'll be fairly common to fix genetic diseases with CRISPR. And then things get really interesting when we start to fix things that aren't genetic. Maybe we want to all fix our predisposition to diabetes. We could potentially go in and fix that before we actually get that disease and make up for not having great genetic lineages.
If you put a time horizon on that, what would you think something like that would be?
Well, probably for the healthy people, it's going to take longer, right? Doctors would rather do no harm than do good. And so that's probably 15 years away from being mainstream. There are other technologies, one called siRNA, which is similar, but it actually stops the production of protein rather than changing the genes. It's one step down. And that's being shown, and there's a drug on the market to treat high cholesterol. And even there's a drug for fatty liver. And so increasingly we're able to change the genetic code or the codes that are coming off the genetic code, which is RNA, which we all have heard about because of COVID.
Right.
But yeah, it's amazing that we can now read the DNA and rewrite it. And in my work, we've just recently figured out how to turn on 3 embryonic genes in the body.
Okay.
And when we do that, just the right 3 genes, that resets the age of the tissue, and it gets rejuvenated.
Are you kidding me? This is work you're doing right now. So in addition to, I'm just processing all this. Like, I think when we first talked about this, I'm like, yeah, they'll be in there, like the adding genes thing, they'll do a little of that, but like to actually alter the genetic sequence of somebody, that won't be in my lifetime. And you're saying that you believe that in some form of that will be in the next 5-ish years we'll be doing that?
Well, there are patients already that have had it done, but for it to be mainstream. Yeah, 5 to 15, depending on the disease. I mean, the more severe, the faster the FDA acts.
What are you most excited about right now? Like in your work, what are you this is the stuff I'm the most excited about right now.
That's easy.
Your face just changed too, by the way, when I asked you.
It's easy.
Yeah.
So we published a year ago on the cover of Nature magazine, which is the highlight of any scientist's career, that we could reset the age of a complex tissue. We chose the mouse's eye. We let mice get old and blind, and we reprogrammed their eye using these 3 genes. They're called O, S, and K for short.
Yeah.
And we turned the age back 80%, and they were able to see again. And so what we're talking about is having found that there's a reset switch in the body to be young again. And the information in the body to be young is still there. So theoretically, you could take someone who's 100 years old and reset their body to be young again. Now, the exciting thing is we've been doing clinical trials or preclinical trials, and there's no apparent downside to this yet.
Oh, my God.
Isn't that great?
No, that's incredible.
Yeah. And so I went home that day and I said, hey, we've cured blindness. And my family went, yeah, can you just unpack the dishwasher? That was a sad day. That's when I knew I could never impress my family. But we have been working ever since. So we first made this discovery about 3 years ago. It ended up being in my book, a little bit of it. And it was a thrill to make this discovery. But since then, we've been doing the hard work, which is to figure out, is it safe enough to put into humans? And we're now testing it in non-human primates just to see if it's safe.
My gosh.
And if all goes well, in the next 2 years, we'll hopefully cure blindness in people.
That is absolutely freaking incredible. That is absolutely bananas.
But it gets better.
Okay.
The eye was just something we chose. I didn't think it would work any better in the eye. In fact, I thought it'd probably work worse. But we found that there's a universal reset switch. So you can reset different parts of the body. You can reset the skin. We've shown you can reset muscle. You can reset, what have we done? The skin was easy. So using the same genes. So we're just basically turning on an embryonic program in older people or middle-aged in their cells and in mice, and they get young again. What does this mean? This means one day it's going to be possible to reset the age of the body. We've done that. We've done that in mice. Now the question is, how soon can we get it into ourselves?
That's bananas. Is there? Here's the guy that grew up with skeptics all over his house. Let's assume that that's true. Did everyone just hear what he just said, by the way? That we may be able to reset the age of a human? We've already been able to do this now in other organisms? That's a minute to just process that, right? And as I process it, I go, wow, that's exciting. I hope I can live long enough so that I can reset my clock.
That's the key.
Right?
The stuff we've talked about today.
Yeah.
The eating, the exercise, what's the other thing? Hot, cold. These are designed, and the supplements, to keep us all alive until this technology becomes available. Because it's not just one thing to slow down aging, which we can do pretty easily just by doing these lifestyle changes, but to reset the age. There's a study from UCLA that shows...
Jeez Louise, that's crazy.
Yeah, it gets crazier. There's a study by Steve Horvath and Greg Fahey. It was published during the first few months of the pandemic. They treated people for a year with a combination of metformin, a bit of growth hormone, and DHEA to offset some of the problems with growth hormone that can cause type 2 diabetes. And they found that when they measured the clock of the body, it went back by about 2 years. And at the time, I thought, yeah, okay, 2 years, that's not a lot. But then I started thinking, if you could do that every year,
Right.
that'd be pretty interesting.
You're literally aging in reverse.
Right. And now, I don't know about immortality. I'd just be happy with an extra 10 years of healthy life, or even 2 years. But we're at a point now where we're able to control aging pretty easily. In my lab, we can drive aging forwards and backwards in mice at will. Aging is malleable now that we have an understanding of how it's controlled and what causes it. And we even have mini brains in the lab. We can take human cells. So Ed, I can take your skin cells. I can make them into stem cells that are pluripotent, meaning I can make anything from you. If I wanted to, and this is not kidding, I could make a sperm out of your skin cells and an egg and fertilize that.
So you can clone me.
I could clone you. I won't do that because it's illegal, but biologically we could do that.
My gosh.
I'm going to get all sorts of phone calls.
You
now.
are. There we go. I'm going to get the emails too.
Hey, can you clone me?
Yeah.
No, but what's important is I can make mini organs from you and test drugs. And what we're doing in the lab is we have.
Wow. Yeah.
Personalized medicine.
Yeah. Wow.
So when you come to my lab and you have to promise you're going to come, I'll show you. We grow these mini brains in the lab. And we've got them from people that are predisposed to Alzheimer's or not. And we have a way to age those brains so that they're now 80 years old, even though they're only a few months old. And they lose their ability to fire electrically. They become demented in the dish, little mini brains. On Instagram, I've shown some photos of these. They're pretty cute. And so we give them Alzheimer's and dementia in the dish. And then what we do is we have the system to turn on those 3 embryonic genes, OS and K, and those brains go back in age. But here's the cool thing. Alzheimer's goes away. They get the electrical activity comes back. Now we do this in a mouse. We make the mouse older, just let them age out, or we accelerate it. And we've been now reversing the age of those brains in the mice. And you can guess what happens. They get their memory ability to learn back.
Unbelievable. Do you hear what you're saying? It's unbelievable.
Well, this is my day job, so it doesn't seem that exciting, but it is when I talk about it.
It's the most exciting stuff. Listen, we're in this time where there's all this doom and gloom about, our wellness and health and the pandemic and all these other things. And it's stuff to be very cognizant of and pay very close attention to. But right at the same time, I feel like Sergey Young and I were talking about this too, who I know you know Sergey and like Sergey as well. It's almost like, man, if you can find a way right now to stay on this planet healthy for the next 10 or 20 years, if you can manage to do that, that there might be an extension of your life at a magnitude of another 20 or 30 potentially healthy years possibly. And you said 10 earlier. If you can just find a way to extend your life, and the finding the way is what we're describing, the hot and cold, the not eating so daggum much, right? The really getting sure about your glucose and how you process it in your body, and taking a look at this metformin and NAD and these other things. And if you can really start to get that stuff together and exercise and eat healthy and put the right food, there may be a completely different world we're living in a matter of a decade.
Yeah, exactly right. And already, because technology is changing so fast already, and it's only going to go exponential. Every year that you stay alive, you get another 3 months of life.
Right now.
Stay alive. Because eventually it's going to be for every year you stay alive, you get another year. And eventually you're going to have negative birthdays.
Come on, Dave. That's.
No, I used to say that this was futuristic.
Yeah, you did. This is why it has so much credibility with me. You used to say many years ago, this is far off, this is possible. So for you to be the one telling me, no, here's the window that it's possible in, probable or possible, carries so much credibility.
I've got some of the best scientists working with me on this, not just at Harvard, but in companies who know how to make drugs. So this isn't just, one day it'll happen. There's investors.
Yeah, sure.
Other investors have jumped in. So Jeff Bezos and others have put large amounts of money. There are billions now to figure this out. So even if I don't make it, I God willing, I don't have a heart attack. But if I do, the genie's out of the bottle. This is going to happen. It's just a question of when.
Yeah. What it means to be, I'm just thinking myself as you're talking, what it means to be a human being is going to potentially be a very different experience within a decade. What it means, and all of the, just the pain and suffering so many people have gone through in lives with cancers and heart disease and losing people that are still here to Alzheimer's and things like that, to think about the quality of life. And people ask me all the time, I was just on a call before we did this with a coaching group I have with all of the stuff going on in the world right now, and I told them I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about humanity. I'm optimistic about life. I'm optimistic about our world. And that's not Pollyanna. I have reasons to believe it. And, you, my friend, are one of those reasons. I just learned from you and feel so inspired by you. Is there a negative to people living so much longer? I think of things like food supply or things like that. Do you ever think about those things? Like, we got to be really careful here because there might be an issue we've not factored in. In other words, do other technologies need to be keeping pace if humans are going to live longer?
Yeah. The answer is yes, and that's the subject of my next book, actually. How do we get out of this mess that we're in?
This mess that we're in of living longer and
No, the mess that the world we've created.
Okay, got you.
Of the stress and the bad food around us. Living longer is part of the solution, actually.
Okay.
So by helping yourself, you actually help save the planet. And that may sound counterintuitive, but let me explain. First of all, there's an economic benefit to living longer. Healthy, right? Productivity.
Sure.
Spending. The economy is driven by people who are healthy and dragged down by people who are not healthy.
Good point.
Yeah. And we did the calculations. By we, I mean a couple of brilliant economists in London, and I was just the third wheel. But they calculated that if you could just extend lifespan by 1 year, let's say everyone went on metformin who could take it, then the savings in the long run to the US would add up to $86 trillion. If you extend it to a decade, it's $365 trillion with a T dollars. This is more money than you can get by doing anything. Save stopping all military spending, which we wouldn't do. But that kind of money can be put towards solving issues like climate change, food supply.
Sure.
And the other thing that I do, and I don't often mention this because it's often not the subject that people want to hear about, but I also work on other problems on the planet. I have a company that detects viruses and bacteria, can diagnose anything from your blood. That's just one. But the one that's relevant that you reminded me is, I co-wrote a patent on the plane over here to California from Boston to preserve fruit. And so the same molecules and coatings on fruit that, the same molecules that work in our bodies also work in plants. In fact, plants make most of these molecules that we ingest. It's one of the reasons I eat stressed out plants, because they make these molecules. Long story short, I'm hoping to extend the shelf life of fruit around the world, and there's a huge amount of fruit and vegetables that are thrown away every day.
Perishes.
Yeah.
You're remarkable, brother. Is there something that keeps you up at night that you worry about?
I don't get kept up at night worrying. I get kept up at night working and talking to people. I do worry a bit that I'm not going to achieve my life's goal, which is to have a medicine that helps millions of people. That would satisfy me. I don't care about prizes and all that stuff. I've won a few and it doesn't do anything. What I'm hoping for is for a little vial of a drug, some medicine that saves millions of lives. And then I'll be happy. And I'm guided by a mentor of mine, Philip Sharp, who is at MIT, and he actually literally won a Nobel Prize. Does he have his Nobel Prize on the wall? No. Wow. He has a little vial of the drug that he made. And that's what he tells me is important to him.
That's so good, David. Okay, a couple more things. Is there any other additional... I'm just processing what we've talked about today. I feel so good that you were here. I want to just say this to you. I always learn when you're around me, and I feel more optimistic with evidence, based in fact of why I feel more optimistic. And I'm grateful that I get to share the conversation today with millions of people that listen to the show. Like, there are some shows when I do them and I'm in the midst of doing them, and I'm like, I'm so grateful for this experience. And that's now twice with you. And I just want to acknowledge that with you. Is there any other gift you'd want to give the audience of, hey, here's another supplement or tip or something that could extend the quality or length of one's life? Is there something we haven't covered that you would just add to what we've talked about? Is anything even related to mental health or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of things. Mental health is very important to me as well. I've learned to reduce stress. Don't worry about the little things. Think about, will this matter in 5-10 years? I know you're very, very good at this. I listen to you as well. I'm grateful to you as well.
Thank you.
And the ability to cope with pressure.
Yeah.
I was a very nervous kid, and in my 20s and in my 30s, getting a job at Harvard was pretty scary. In my 40s and now in my 50s, I'm a relatively calm guy, and you have to work at it. It doesn't come naturally. Some breathing. I'm more recently now trying meditation at night.
Are you?
Just for a little bit, just for 15 minutes or so a day. but I find that I can even get by with less sleep. I have what's a helmet and a headset that helps me. I'm not very good at meditation because my mind is everywhere.
I imagine.
But it's called BrainTap, and I have no connection to them, but I like it. BrainTap has headphones. You listen to calming music, and it's shining light in your eyes at frequencies that get you to calm down. So mental health, very important, because if you're always overly stressed, a little bit of agitation's good, right? It gets us going. But if you have cortisol coursing through your veins, it will accelerate aging. Okay. The other thing is I'm working on democratizing another type of test for age, which is your true biological age, which is measuring the chemicals that are on DNA that actually determine biologically how old you are. And it starts at conception, and it ticks away even when you're young. And I can basically take a blood test or a cheek swab from you or anybody and predict how old you are, but also when you might die if you don't change your life. And what I want to do is give everybody the equivalent of their credit score and help them improve their credit score. Right? So you got this number, and here's what we think you should do given everything we know about you. And that way, just coach millions of people into a healthier, longer life. And we do have a sign up, so that's my gift. You can get, so we're developing this test, and it's going to be a lot cheaper than anything. We've just filed a patent that brings the cost down by a couple of orders of magnitude. The website is called tallyhealth.com. So get on that list, and I'll contact you, and we'll see. So tallyhealth.com, and that's the latest spin out from my lab. But I think that in the same way medicine will help millions of people 5-10 years from now, this will be soon. And that, this coaching that we do, I love touching people's lives now, not just saying, in 5 years, I'll get back to you.